Thank you very much, Professor Ram Singh, for your kind words. I'm humbled. I think I don't deserve the kind of things that you have said about me. Nevertheless, uh, respected Mr. James Chaudhary, former member of Parliament and President Rashtriya Lokdal, and the guest of honor of today's program, my esteemed colleague and friend, Professor Ram Singh, who is going to preside over this function. My dear Mr. Arjun from Haryana Thinkers Forum, and all other esteemed friends, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. I know I can see very many senior colleagues of mine, like Professor Premberg, Professor Sri OPS Malik ji, and many more actually, Professor DPS Verma, Kuhar. I cannot name everyone for the paucity of time, but I'm extremely grateful to each one of them. A very good evening to all the distinguished members who have devoted this part of the day today for Chaudhary Charan Singh Memorial Lecture. I would like to congratulate Haryana Thinkers Forum in general and Mr. Arjun Singh Daya in particular, who has taken special interest in the organization of today's event. Thank you very much, Arjun, once again. Ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I express profound grief on the sad demise of our beloved leader Chaudhary Ajit Singh ji, whom we lost on the 6th of this month. Death, I know, and all of you know, is always a painful experience, but it becomes more painful when the life is taken away in a very untimely manner. And this is what has happened with Chaudhary Ajit Singh ji, and we are very sad about it. I pay homage to the departed soul. May his soul rest in peace, and may God give enough strength to Chaudhary Jayant and his family to bear this irreparable loss. Today, the nation pays rich tribute to the fifth Prime Minister of India on his 34th death anniversary. And it is a matter of great honor and a very special privilege for me to deliver Chaudhary Charan Singh Memorial Lecture on this occasion. As all of us know, Chaudhary Charan Singh was an institution in himself. His persona and his work is so vast that it is difficult to encompass his entire vision and contribution in a 30 to 40-minute lecture. So, given the constraint of time, I'll try to reflect in brief about his early life so that our younger generation knows about it, how he has risen from the dust to the highest office of the land, his incredible talent, many people are ignorant about that, his electoral politics, his land reform contribution, his secular credentials, and his transition from state politics to the central politics, and some of his unique personal qualities and the opinion of the biased world about Chaudhary Charan Singh. I know we all are here today because somewhere deep down in our heart we have been touched by the charismatic personality of our beloved leader Chaudhary Charan Singh. Let me share with you that our family had a closer and tenderer relationship with Chaudhary Sahab. His younger sister, Risalo Devi ji, she was married to my father's distant cousin, Chaudhary Raghbir Singh ji, in village Bavli in district Bagpat. And interestingly, Chabroli and Bagpat had been the Karam Bhumi of Chaudhary Sahab for over 50 years. He was not a man born with a silver spoon like many others who ruled the destiny of this country for many, many years. He made his way up, like Ram Singh has said a little while ago, and created a niche for himself by sheer dint of hard work in Indian polity. He was born on 23rd December 1902 in the family of a small tenant farmer in Nurpur village, which later migrated to Badola village in the Meerut district. Let me tell you that his father did not own any agricultural land, बटाई पर जमीन खेती करते थे. And he had his early schooling in a rural setting, deprived of basic infrastructure. He was an exceptionally brilliant student with a very keen interest in knowing almost everything around him. He earned his master's degree from Agra College and law degree from Meerut College, Meerut. After that, he started his practice in Ghaziabad. And that place provided him a platform to join the Indian National Congress in 1929. Soon he joined Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha movement and suffered imprisonment thrice during the freedom struggle between 1930 and 1942. One of my friends asked me when I wrote a piece as an obituary to Chaudhary Ajit Singh ji, that what role did Charan Singh play in freedom movement? I wrote a very polite message to my dear friend and I said, pick up the book and read about Chaudhary Charan Singh. He was a scholar of incredible talent. Chaudhary Sahab, he was a genius of unequaled fertility. But some of his contemporaries who had little understanding of rural India were obsessively jealous of his two unique characteristics, which Chaudhary Sahab was endowed with. One, his deep knowledge and understanding of the issues of rural masses. And two, his courage to speak the truth and face the consequences of his speaking the truth. That was the remarkable quality of Chaudhary Charan Singh. He was a great man with great ideas. But I'm sorry to say, he remains a much misunderstood man in Indian politics due to the cruelty of the vast world around him. And in fact, sometimes I cannot refrain myself. I wanted to use another word, which my wife forbade me to do that. He was even a vilified man in Indian politics because of the cruelty and because of the vastness and prejudices in the mind of the people around him, amongst his contemporaries, actually. Most people did not know, even at that point in time, and still do not know, that he was a scholar of great eminence, and that his scholarly contributions in the fields of agriculture reforms, economics, politics, and social dynamics were widely acknowledged and cited by international scholars. He was a rare breed of politicians who wrote extensively on agrarian reforms and economic issues. You can count the politicians on fingers who have ever written something of any substance. Professor Torrance of the London School of Economics was so impressed by his scholarly work that he regarded him as an extraordinary intellectual. And some of his outstanding contributions are like abolition of Jamindari, Agrarian Revolution, joint farming X rate, Indian poverty and its solution, Indian economic policy, the Gandhian blueprint, and they are the books actually which we need to study and read actually. In fact, his persona and his work is very vast, and it is difficult, to capture that within 30-40 minutes, as I have said. In fact, I want to say one thing to the younger generation today, and I would request earnestly my fellow colleagues who are my contemporaries to share this information with the younger population, that if someone is remotely interested in Indian politics and rural India, then these books which I have mentioned of Chaudhary Sahab become a must read. I would like to share a little about his era of electoral politics. He started his political journey from the chairmanship of the district board in 1929 during British time. He was elected for the first time to the UP Legislative Assembly on the Congress ticket from Meerut district with a massive poll mandate in 1937. He got 80% of the total votes polled in that election. And after his second victory in 1946 in the UP Assembly, he became Parliamentary Secretary in Govind Ballapant government. It was during this time when his contemporaries recognized the power of his pen. He drafted a number of revolutionary bills, all by himself, and memoranda, including the abolition of Jamidari Bill, which became a model act for other states as well. He had worked as a cabinet minister with several chief ministers right from 1951 until he severed ties with the Congress in 1966. He formed his own party, Bharatiya Kranti Dal, in 1966. जब हम बहुत नारे लगा करते थे, with a renewed vigor to redefine the economic policies of the state and the country. It was not just like that he split and he created a party without any basis. You can see the ideology, you can see his thoughts actually, which had gone into the making of the Bharatiya Kranti Dal in 1966. And this was the time, mind you, when Mrs. Gandhi was trying to establish her leadership across the states, because she had also split Congress party and she was trying to have her own government in different states. That brought him into face-to-face confrontation with Mrs. Gandhi. The newly formed party Bharatiya Kranti Dal put up such a strong fight and almost swept some parts of Uttar Pradesh in 1967 elections. And with that, Chaudhary Charan Singh became the first non-Congress chief minister in 1967. In 1970, again, he became the chief minister of UP a second time. And in 1974, Chaudhary Sahab renamed his party Bharatiya Kranti Dal as Bharatiya Lok Dal. Now, I would like to share a little about the land reforms, the pioneering contribution that he made. He was a true Gandhian in his approach. There is a super inspiring quote of Chaudhary Charan Singh, which is written by people in different words but carries the same meaning. वो अक्सर कहते थे कि भारत की खुशहाली का रास्ता गांव और खेतों से होकर गुजरता है. The passage of India's prosperity passes through her villages and fields. His knowledge and understanding of rural life was of unparalleled magnitude and reliability. He did pioneering work for abolition of Jamidari and consolidation of land holdings in UP to the advantage of small farmers. His model of agrarian reforms became so popular in the country that it was adopted later on by several states. But unfortunately, most remained woefully ignorant about his land reform crusade and his unflinching commitment towards providing a dignified life to the poor and downtrodden, and which is why he was a much loved and respected leader of rural masses. He was considered unprogressive by some for his opposition to big dams and the Soviet model of large-scale industry. But this conviction of Chaudhary Charan Singh was rooted in his deep understanding of rural life and its problems. He knew that the construction of big dams would lead to submergence of huge tracts of cultivable land and displacement of hundreds of thousands of villagers, besides causing other colossal environmental hazards. Instead, he worked for installation of tube wells, for irrigation, and establishment of small-scale industries to provide work to landless laborers and artisans. He worked tirelessly for both the farmers and landless laborers and artisans, and which is why he remained the guiding light of the rural masses. He had mooted the proposal of providing 50% reservation to the wards of actual tillers of the agricultural land, as he believed that they would have better appreciation of the problems of 80% of the population living in rural India. And secondly, he knew that engagement of too many hands in agriculture would neither eradicate illiteracy nor address the issue of unemployment and underemployment in rural India. If we were 5 or 7 sisters and brothers, all of us were engaged in that 1 kilo of land. Not too many people were required actually in that agriculture. He was also a very fearless man. Charan Singh was always willing to sacrifice for the cause of farmers and agricultural laborers. He was the first in the independent India to have brought the peasant issues in electoral politics, and the only one who opposed Nehru's resolution on cooperative and collective farming during the annual session of the Congress at Nagpur in 1959. He believed, because he knew it, that pooling of agricultural land in Indian context would be suicidal for country's economy. Although he couldn't succeed in installing the resolution of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, but his spirit and passion was admired by one and all. He was a man without fear who always stood up against the odd without flinching. And the very fact, remember, the very fact that despite the approval of Nehru's resolution in Nagpur Adhivesan, it was not implemented on the ground, that itself validated Chaudhary Charan Singh's foresight and knowledge of rural India in general and Indian peasantry in particular. Notwithstanding his massive mass base and his highly relevant pro-poor policies, he was not given his due in the then upper caste dominated Congress, which he ultimately had to part ways with in 1966. Chaudhary Charan Singh was a man of principles, actually. He was a very serious-minded person. He had a serious disposition of thought. His persona was such that nobody could ever dare take liberty with him. He never sympathized with self-seekers. And he also had a childlike mind. He had a very spontaneous and quick to react attitude. There are numerous instances on record wherein he had cancelled the tickets of his party candidates at the 11th hour. Once he came to know that, they had done something wrong actually. With the slightest hint of their any socially undesirable conduct, he would return the donation of the party if it had come through an unscrupulous source. He was admired for his kindness and his honesty. One day, he saw, there are many instances. I have also experienced once all by myself. But one day, he saw one of his acquaintances making a phone call from his official residence. So he was the chief minister then, he immediately asked his secretary to put up a register and charge all the private calls made from his office, from him. His secretary said, "Sir, you have unlimited number of calls quota. You need not worry about it." He said, "No, nothing doing. The office will not be abused by the visitors. I will pay from my pocket." So on the one hand, see the kindness of the man, and on the other hand, see the integrity of the man. He had the ability, in fact, to inspire people, assuring them by living examples that their welfare was the highest priority for him. He was branded a leader of a particular caste, but he was a very secular man. He was an advocate. I'll give one example. He was an advocate of a smaller state for good governance. He had floated the idea of Delhi Suba by merging some western districts from the state of UP and some districts from Haryana. But when some of his opponents gave color to this idea of making a Jatistan, he immediately distanced himself from the move because he never wanted to be identified with a particular caste. And people remained equally oblivious about the fact that he was the man in the history of the country who had written a letter to Pandit Nehru on 22nd of May 1952 to accord preference in government services to those who were willingly ready to embrace the idea of intercaste marriage. Had that idea been implemented, we would have been a different country by now. But alas, that his opponents tried to portray him as a leader of a particular class, which is very painful. He had a much bigger vision for developing the political leadership in the country, and which is why he was able to enlarge his base, his political influence in many northern states by assimilating all castes and communities. He had identified politically potential people and supported them to the hilt in electoral politics, regardless of their caste and faith. I can name some of them like Banarsi Das Gupta ji, Ram Naresh Yadav ji, Mulayam Singh Yadav, Madhu Lime, B.P. Moria, Karpuri Thakur, Ramvilas Paswan. He brought Ramvilas Paswan and made him context from Bijnor. Rasid Masood, Sarwar Hussain, just to name a few. Now I will say something about the transition from state politics to the center. Charan Singh catapulted himself in national politics in 1970 and continued to be a considerable political power right from the formation of the Janata Party in 1977 until his demise in 1987. For 10 long years. He was a great advocate of peaceful resistance to oppression. When people's freedom was trampled in 1975, he was one of those prominent leaders who stood up with full force to the emergency, leading to his political imprisonment for almost 2 long years. After emergency, when the 6th Lok Sabha elections were held in March 1977, Choi Saab contested from Bagpat seat and emerged as a strong claimant for the post of Prime Minister because he had largest number of MPs in his group. But as luck would have it, Mr. Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister of the Janata government and Chaudhary Charan Singh became the Home Minister first in March 1977 and later on the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. But when the Janata government collapsed in 1979, Chaudhary Charan Singh became the 5th Prime Minister of India on the 28th of July and continued until January 14, 1980. Thereafter, he was elected twice to Parliament on his Lokdal Party ticket, once in 1980. He was in fact the leader of the opposition in the Parliament because he had the largest number of MPs with him in the opposition. And he again won in 1984. After his long and unblemished political journey of over 5 decades, he left for Hamilly Abode on 29th of May 1987. And today we are commemorating his 34th death anniversary. He was a very honest man, as I had already said. While he exuded unblemished honesty and uprightness, in truth, most of the people barely know this quality of the man. He remained a relentless crusader against corruption at all levels, from lowest revenue officials to irrigation and transport department, including nexus between police and politicians. His straightforwardness and characteristic of calling a spade created more foes than friends within and across the party. He had the integrity to remain uncompromising all through his political journey spanning over 5 decades on issues that were not grounded in truth. And his only unassailable shield was his candor, honesty, incorruptibility, and truth. He was a prudent statesman and an astute politician who had great ability and skills in handling all types of situations. Here, I'll take a little liberty. He was the Home Minister and he was living at 3 Racecourse. And because in relation, he was my Mamaji. So what I did was that I went to his residence in the afternoon, seeking ticket, not for myself, for my beloved teacher, actually, Dr. Ranbir Singh. And when Choi Saab alighted from the car, everyone ran away, actually, because us tarike ka aura he had. I was the only one face to face with him. He recognized me, but he said, "Tum kaun?" मैं थोड़ा सा मुस्कुराया, चोई साहब भी हल्का सा मुस्कुराए और कहने लगे, कैसे? अब I was very raw actually. I did not know how to articulate things. So I said, सर मैं, हाँ, तुम क्या कर रहे हो आजकल? मैंने कहा, सर, आई एम डूइंग माई PhD. तो मैंने कहा, मैं टिकट के लिए आया हूँ. तो कहने लगे, पहले PhD कर ले अपनी. तो मैंने कहा, सर, मैं अपने लिए नहीं आया हूँ, मैं प्रिंसिपल साहब के लिए आया हूँ. तब भी मेरे से नाम नहीं बोला गया उनके सामने. उन्होंने कहा, कौन से प्रिंसिपल साहब? मैंने कहा, डॉक्टर रणबीर सिंह, वो जाट कॉलेज बड़ौत में प्रिंसिपल थे, आजकल अरविंदो कॉलेज में है. तो उन्होंने मुझे कहा कि ऐसा ना करें कि जो लोग टीचिंग में हैं उनको टीचिंग में रखें, जो राजनीति में हैं उनको राजनीति में रखें. मैंने कहा, सर, आपकी मर्जी है. कहते, मेरी तो यही मर्जी है. So that was the personal dialogue which I had with him. But I mean, as I said, that he was a prudent statesman and astute politician, but all his political maneuverings were based on his principles of honesty, truthfulness, and public relevance of his policies. These three things which we should remember. And his forthright approach and straightforwardness gave him an edge over his opponents. The people of the country will continue to remember him for his simplicity, honesty, secular credentials, intolerance to corruption, and above all for his tireless work for the cause of peasantry. Chaudhary Charan Singh was really a statesman in true sense. One can go on and on, but I think we should be mindful of the time limit. In the end, I once again express my sincere thanks to the Haryana Thinkers Forum in general and Arjun in particular, who has taken pains in organizing this event, and all the distinguished members attending the program. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Ram Singh, and over to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for such a wonderful talk.